He came home one afternoon, tired from work, expecting to find peace in his own space. As he walked toward his garage, something felt unusual. The door was slightly ajar, which immediately caught his attention because he always kept it closed and locked. He pushed it open and stopped in his tracks. His entire garage, the place where he normally parked his car and kept his tools neatly arranged, was now filled with stacks of brown cardboard boxes. They were piled from the concrete floor up to the shelves, leaving almost no room to move around. Some of them were marked with black marker, others taped carelessly, and a few looked like they had been dragged rather than carried at first. He thought maybe he had entered the wrong garage. He rubbed his eyes, stepped back, and double-checked the house number. It was definitely his place. His mind began racing, trying to think if his family had ordered something big or if there had been a delivery mistake. The number of boxes was too much for any regular delivery. They weren't even labeled with his name. Curiosity mixed with confusion, he walked further in, touching one of the boxes. It felt heavy, stuffed with something solid. Another box rattled like it had kitchenware or glass inside. His confusion soon turned into irritation. Whoever had done this had clearly used his garage without asking. His car had no space now, and his weekend plans of fixing up his shelves seemed impossible. He pulled out his phone and started calling his wife, thinking maybe she knew something about it. She was just as shocked as him, denying any involvement. He called his neighbor next door to ask if they had noticed someone around, but they hadn't seen anything unusual. The mystery of the boxes began to feel heavier with every minute. He stepped back into the driveway and scanned the neighborhood. Everything looked normal. Kids were playing down the street, a dog barked behind a fence, and sprinklers watered a freshly cut lawn. Yet, his garage had turned into a warehouse without his knowledge. He began asking himself who would have the nerve to leave so many boxes. In someone else's space? It didn't take long before the first clue appeared. As he stood there frowning, another neighbor walked by and casually asked if those were Karen's boxes. The name immediately triggered recognition. Everyone in the community knew Karen. She was the self-proclaimed queen of the Homeowners Association, always telling others how to keep their lawns, what colors they could paint their doors, and even how long their cars could be parked on the street. She carried herself with an air of authority that irritated nearly everyone, but most avoided direct conflict with her. The thought that Karen might have been behind this made sense in a strange way. She was the type to assume she had control over everything. Still, he found it unbelievable that she would simply open his garage and use it as storage. To be sure, he asked the neighbor what they meant. The neighbor shrugged and said they had seen Karen earlier in the day, walking back and forth from her house with a dolly stacked with boxes. Apparently she had been moving things and muttering about needing extra space. His jaw tightened. He could hardly believe the audacity. This was his property, his garage, and without even the smallest request, she had decided to dump her things there. For a moment, he wondered if she might have thought she was doing no harm, maybe thinking she would remove them quickly. But looking at the sheer amount of boxes, he realized this was no small temporary favor. She had practically relocated part of her household into his garage. Anger bubbled inside him. But mixed with it was disbelief and even a bit of amusement at how ridiculous the situation was. Who in their right mind thought this behavior was acceptable? He pictured her dragging the boxes in, stacking them up without any hesitation, as if the place was her own. He could almost imagine her muttering to herself, "Well, he won't mind. He has the space anyway." That thought made his blood boil. Walking around the garage, he noticed that some of his own belongings had been shoved aside. His toolbox, normally lined up neatly against the wall, had been pushed into a corner. A lawn chair was folded awkwardly, leaning against the water heater. The lack of respect in the act burned him more than the boxers themselves. It wasn't just about space, it was about the nerve of someone trespassing and treating his property like a public storage unit. He tried to calm himself, reminding his heart not to rush into anger. But the more he looked, the more the reality sank in. This wasn't a small misunderstanding. This was an entitled move by someone who thought rules applied to everyone but herself. He stepped back outside, letting the fresh air cool his face. He considered his options. He could call the police right away and report trespassing. He could confront Karen directly and demand she remove everything immediately. Or he could take a moment to think of the best way to handle someone like her, because direct confrontation often led to unnecessary drama when it came to Karen. Still, one thing was crystal clear in his mind. This was his space, and he had not given anyone permission to use it. The violation stung more than the inconvenience. The garage, his personal zone of order and privacy, had been invaded. And knowing who had done it only made it worse, because Karen was not just anyone. She was the type of person who always looked down on others, lecturing them about responsibility while doing whatever suited her. The weight of the boxes seemed heavier now, not just physically but symbolically. They represented her arrogance, her belief that she could take what wasn't hers and face no consequences. He closed the garage door slowly, feeling the lock click in place. His mind was already turning, thinking about what this act of disrespect meant and how he would respond. The peace of his home had been disturbed, and he knew this was not something he could ignore. The next day he decided it was time to deal with the situation. He could not walk past those boxes in his garage without feeling his blood boil. Every time he looked at them, they reminded him that someone had crossed a line. He was not the kind of man who liked unnecessary fights, but he was also not someone who would allow himself to be walked over. So, he gathered his thoughts and walked across the street to Karen's house. Karen lived in one of the biggest homes in the neighborhood, a 2-story place with freshly painted shutters and a perfectly trimmed lawn that she always bragged about. She was standing outside when he arrived, wearing her usual outfit of casual clothes, but with an attitude that made her look like she was the president of the whole neighborhood. She had her arms folded, watching him approach with a knowing smirk, almost as if she had been expecting him. He stopped in front of her and, keeping his voice calm, said, "Karen, I need to ask you about the boxes in my garage. Did you put them there?" Karen did not even look surprised. Instead, she waved her hand as if the question was too small for her. "Oh yes," she said lightly. "Those are mine. I needed some extra space for a while, and your garage was empty, so I put them there. It's not a big deal." Her tone made his jaw tighten. Not a big deal? His garage, his property, had been turned into her storage unit, and she was acting like it was the most natural thing in the world. He took a deep breath before answering, trying to keep his voice steady. "Karen, you can't just use my garage without asking me. That's my private space. I need you to remove those boxes." Karen raised her eyebrows and gave him the kind of smile that was not friendly at all. It was the smile of someone who thought they were in control. "Relax," she said. "It's only temporary. I'm a board member of the HOA, and sometimes we have to make quick decisions for the community. Your garage had space, and I needed it. Don't worry, I'll get them out when I have time." His patience cracked a little. "This isn't about space for the community," he said firmly. "This is about you putting your things where they don't belong. My garage is not part of the HOA storage. It's my home." Karen's expression hardened. She was no longer smiling, but now looked annoyed, as if he was the one making the mistake. "You're being dramatic," she replied, crossing her arms tighter. "It's just a garage. You still have your driveway. The boxes aren't hurting anyone. Honestly, you should be glad I trusted you with them. Some people in this neighborhood would love to be in your position." Her words shocked him. Glad. Trusted. She was twisting the situation completely. Felt his pulse quicken. "Karen, let me make it clear," he said slowly. "You didn't ask me. You didn't tell me. You just decided on your own to use my property. It's not trust. That's disrespect. I'm asking you right now to move those boxes out of my garage." For a long moment, they stood there staring at each other, the air heavy with tension. Finally, Karen gave a short laugh, one without any humor.
"You're really
going to make a scene over this? Fine, I'll move them when I can. But don't expect me to drop everything just because you're suddenly upset. I'm busy, and I'll get to it when it suits me." Her dismissive tone made him clench his fists at his side. He wanted to shout to tell her how outrageous she was being, but he also knew that shouting would only give her more power. Karen was the kind of person who fed on drama. The calmer he stayed, the more it showed that he was in control. So instead, he nodded once and said, "I'll give you until the end of the week. After that, I'll handle it myself." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Handle it yourself?" She repeated sharply. "What's that supposed to mean?" He kept his voice even. "Means I'll make sure my garage is clear one way or another. You have until the end of the week." Without waiting for her reply, he turned and walked back to his house. He could feel her eyes burning into his back the whole way. But he didn't look back. Inside his house, he let out a long breath. Confronting Karen had not gone smoothly, but at least he had made his point. The problem was, deep down, he already knew she would not move the boxes. Karen was stubborn, and once she decided she had the upper hand, she never gave it up easily. Still, he had to give her the chance. If she ignored him, then he would be ready with his own plan. Over the next few days, every time he checked the garage, the boxes remained untouched. They stood there like a wall of defiance, each one a reminder of Karen's arrogance. Sometimes he caught himself imagining what could be inside them. Old clothes, kitchenware, holiday decorations. He didn't care what was in them, but the mystery only made the situation feel more absurd when he saw Karen around the neighborhood. She carried herself with even more confidence than usual, as if daring him to challenge her again. Once, as he passed by, she even said, "Don't worry, I'll get to it soon," in a mocking voice that told him she had no intention of moving anything. Her arrogance left him simmering, but it also gave him clarity. This wasn't just about boxers anymore. This was about respect. Karen believed she could do whatever she wanted because of her title on the HOA board. Believed rules were for others, not for her. But he knew something she didn't. Everyone else in the neighborhood was tired of her as well. People whispered complaints about her, rolled their eyes when she passed by, but no one dared to confront her directly. That was why she felt so powerful. He realized then that if he let her win this battle, it wouldn't just be about the garage. It would mean she could take even more liberties in the future. Not only with him, but with anyone. Could not allow that to happen. He had drawn his line in the sand, and if she refused to respect it, he would show her that even the most arrogant person had limits. And so he waited, counting down the days until the week ended. Each time he opened the garage, he felt a mixture of irritation and determination. The boxer sat there mocking him silently, but he no longer felt powerless. He had confronted Karen, made his demand clear, and when the time came, he would take. The next step, he was done being polite. He was ready to teach Karen a lesson she would never forget. The days passed slowly, and with each sunrise, his patience grew thinner. The boxes were still there, stacked in his garage as if they were cemented into the floor. He checked every evening after work, hoping that maybe Karen had finally kept her word and removed them, but nothing had changed. They stood there untouched, blocking his car from fitting inside and leaving him frustrated every time he had to park outside on the street. It wasn't just the inconvenience anymore, it was the feeling of being disrespected inside his own home. By the end of the week, it was obvious Karen had no intention of moving them. He hadn't seen her near the garage even once. Seemed to be avoiding him altogether. When he spotted her walking her dog around the neighborhood, she would look the other way or wave casually as if nothing was wrong. That only fueled his anger. She thought she could ignore him, and by doing nothing, she could win. His family was beginning to feel the stress too. His wife complained about the mess every time she opened the garage door, and his kids asked why. They couldn't ride their bikes inside anymore. He didn't want them to see him as powerless, so he promised them he would fix it soon. But deep down, he was struggling to find the best way forward. He could call the police, but he didn't. I want to start a legal war with someone who thrived on drama? He could take the boxes and dump them on her lawn, but that would only escalate things into a public fight. And the HOA board would probably find a way to spin it against him. He needed a solution that was both clever and final, something Karen couldn't twist into her advantage. Meanwhile, the boxers themselves seemed to mock him. He noticed one had a label scribbled in permanent marker, "Christmas lights." Another said "old kitchen stuff." One was even marked Karen's books. It confirmed what he already knew. They were personal items, not anything to do with the HOA. She hadn't stored them there for the community. She had simply decided her neighbor's garage was free storage. Every time he read the labels, it reminded him that she had acted without shame or guilt. One evening, while trying to squeeze past the boxes to reach his toolbox, he nearly tripped. Over one of the smaller cartons, the cardboard tore a little at the corner, and he could see stacks of old photo albums inside. It struck him how careless she had been to leave such personal things in someone else's space without even considering. What might happen to them? That carelessness gave him an idea. She didn't care enough to protect her belongings, then maybe he didn't need to either. But still, he hesitated. He had never been the type to retaliate. He preferred peace, quiet, and respect among neighbors. Yet this situation had pushed him beyond his usual boundaries. Karen's arrogance wasn't just a small annoyance anymore. It was invading his daily life. Each morning he walked past those boxes, and each evening he came home to find them still, sitting there, untouched. It felt like a constant reminder that Karen believed she was above the rules. The other neighbors noticed too. One day, his friend across the street asked quietly, "She still hasn't moved them, huh?" He shook his head. The friend chuckled bitterly and said, "Classic Karen. She did something similar to me once with my trash bins. Tried to tell me where to place them. Swear, that woman thinks this neighborhood is her kingdom." That small conversation gave him some relief. At least he wasn't alone in his frustration. Everyone saw her behavior for what it was. Still, no one had ever stood up to her strongly enough to make her change. That night he sat in his living room staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in his mind. Karen had ignored his polite request. She had laughed at his warning. She had treated his property as her own and left him to deal with the mess. The question wasn't whether she would remove the boxers, because clearly she wouldn't, but what he was going to do about it? The answer didn't come immediately. It formed slowly, like a shadow growing longer at sunset. At first, it was just a thought. What if he really did handle it himself, the way he had told her? What if he simply made the boxes disappear? The idea brought a flicker of satisfaction, but he pushed it aside, unsure if he was really capable of following through. But as the hours passed, the thought returned again and again, stronger each time, till it began to feel like the only way out. The following day, as he scrolled through his phone during his lunch break, he came across a local community marketplace app where people listed free items. Furniture, clothes, old tools, all kinds of things were posted there, and people snatched them up quickly. That's when the plan came together in his mind like puzzle pieces fitting perfectly. If Karen wanted to treat his garage like a storage unit, then maybe he would treat her boxes like unwanted junk left in his space. He could list them online as free pickup and let strangers do the work for him. By the time Karen realized what had happened, it would be too late. The thought filled him with a strange mix of excitement and relief. For the first time in weeks, he felt like he had power over the situation. Instead of arguing with her, instead of begging or waiting, he would take action quietly, cleverly, and legally. After all, the boxes were on his property, abandoned without permission. He had every right to get rid of them. But as satisfying as the idea was, he also felt nervous. He imagined Karen's reaction if she discovered what he was planning. She would probably storm into his yard, shouting about rights and rules, maybe even threatening legal action. Yet even in that imagined scenario, he realized something important. She had no real ground to stand on. She wanted to involve the HOA or even the police. She would have to admit she had trespassed and stored her personal belongings in someone else's garage without permission. She would look foolish, and she knew it. That realization made him smile for the first time in days. He finally understood that he had the upper hand, not her. The growing frustration of the past weeks turned into determination. Karen had underestimated him, thinking he would just complain quietly and then give up. But she was wrong. He was ready to show her that she couldn't control everything, and that her arrogance had limits. The days of waiting and frustration had served a purpose. They had built his resolve. Now every time he looked at the boxes, he didn't just feel anger. He felt anticipation. Soon those boxes would be gone. Soon his garage would be his again. And when Karen came demanding answers, he would be ready with the simplest truth. She had no right to put them there in the first place. He woke up early on Saturday with a clear decision in his mind. The week was over, and Karen had not moved a single box. His garage still looked like a warehouse that belonged to someone else. Enough was enough. He made his coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and opened his laptop. His fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment, as if he was about to cross a line he could never return from. Then he typed the words, "free boxes, first come, first serve." It felt strange, almost daring to write those words. He added a short description. Assorted household items, books, decorations, all must go. Pick up only. Then he uploaded a few quick photos he had taken of the garage the night before. Pictures showed the towers of cardboard stacked up neatly, almost inviting. He looked at the screen one more time, double-checked everything, and finally hit the button to post. The ad went live within minutes. He refreshed the page and already saw people clicking on it. Little thrill ran through him. He knew how popular free listings were. People loved getting things for nothing, and most didn't ask questions. He sat back with his coffee, waiting to see how long it would take before someone contacted him. It didn't take long at all. Within half an hour, his phone buzzed with a message. Someone wanted to know if the boxes were still available and if they could come right away. He replied quickly, "Yes, come now. First come, first serve." The person sent back a thumbs up emoji and said they were on their way. He walked into the garage, looked at the stacks one more time, and smiled. This was really happening. For weeks, those boxes had made him feel powerless, but now they were about to vanish, one by one, carried away by eager strangers. He felt a wave of satisfaction wash over him. The first pickup arrived in less than an hour. A small car pulled up in front of his house, and a young couple stepped out. They looked excited, almost giddy, as if they were about to uncover hidden treasure. "Are you the one with the free boxes?" the man asked. He nodded, opened the garage door, and gestured toward the mountain of cardboard. "Take as many as you like," he said simply. Their eyes widened. They began opening boxes on the spot, peeking inside. "Oh wow, look at this," the woman whispered, pulling out a set of glass bowls. They started loading boxes into their car, working fast, smiling the whole time. Within minutes, they had filled the back seat and trunk, then thanked him before driving off. He closed the garage door halfway and leaned against it, a grin spreading across his face. For the first time in weeks, the garage looked lighter. There was actual space on the floor where the boxes had been. He felt free. But that was only the beginning. More messages poured in. People wanted directions, people begged him to hold boxes for them, and some even asked if there were electronics inside. He didn't bother answering too many questions. He just told everyone the same thing. First come, first serve. It created a rush, a sense of urgency. And soon, cars started arriving one after another. By the afternoon, his driveway looked like a busy market. Strangers carried boxes to their vehicles, chatting happily as if they had just struck gold. A man with a pickup truck took 4 big boxes at once. A college student loaded her small hatchback with 3 boxes labeled books. One family even brought their kids, and the children giggled as they peeked into cartons filled with holiday decorations. He stood by quietly, watching it all unfold, offering a polite nod whenever someone thanked him. Inside, he felt a mixture of amusement and triumph. This was better than he had imagined. Not only was the garage clearing up quickly, but he didn't have to lift a single box himself. People were doing the work for him, and they were thrilled. About it, by evening, only a few boxes remained, scattered in the corner. He decided to leave them for the latecomers who might still arrive. As the sun set, he closed the garage door and stepped inside his house, feeling lighter than he had in weeks. His plan had worked. Karen's arrogance had met its match, and it was beautiful to see. The next morning, when he checked the garage, the last few boxes were gone too. Someone must have picked them up overnight. The space was finally empty, clean, and his again. He walked inside, ran his hand over the now clear floor, and let out a long sigh of relief. It felt like a victory, not just over Karen, but over the helplessness he had been carrying. Later that afternoon, he saw Karen walking her dog down the street. She hadn't noticed yet. She gave him her usual fake smile, the one that carried more smugness than warmth. He smiled back, but inside he was laughing, knowing what was coming. It didn't take long for the storm to arrive. That evening, he heard sharp knocking at his door. At! When he opened it, Karen stood there, her face red with fury. Her voice shook with outrage. "Where are my boxes?" she demanded. He kept his expression calm, almost blank, though inside he felt like cheering. "What boxes?" he asked simply. "Don't play dumb with me," she snapped. "The ones I stored in your garage, they're gone." "What did you do with them?" He let a pause hang in the air before answering. "You mean the boxes you left? In my garage without permission? The ones that made it impossible for me to use my own space? Those boxes?" Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out right away. She hadn't expected him to turn her own actions back at her. Finally, she shouted, "You had no right. Those were my belongings." "They were left in my garage," he said calmly, "unattended. For weeks, without my permission. I treated them like abandoned items. If you didn't want that to happen, you should have respected my property." Her face twisted with anger. "Do you realize what you've done? Do you know how important some of those things were?" He shrugged lightly. "That's not my problem. You had every chance to remove them. I asked you politely. I even gave you a deadline. You chose to ignore me. So I handled it." For a moment, Karen looked as though she might explode. Her fists clenched, her face turned redder, and her voice rose, but then she stopped herself. He could see it in her eyes, the realization that she had no defense. If she pushed this further, she would have to admit to everyone that she had trespassed and misused his garage. She would look foolish, and she knew it. So instead, she spun on her heel and stormed off without another word, her dog trotting behind. He closed the door, leaned against it, and let out a laugh. The boxers were gone, his garage was free, and Karen had been left powerless for once in her life. That night, as he parked his car safely inside his empty garage for the first time in weeks, he felt a deep satisfaction. Not only had he won, but he had done it in a way that Karen could never undo. She had underestimated him, and that was her downfall. The clever plan had worked perfectly, and he knew the story of her lost boxes would spread quietly through the neighborhood. For once, Karen had been beaten at her own game. The news spread through the neighborhood faster than he had expected. At first, it was just whispers, neighbors talking in low voices about how Karen had lost all her boxes. But soon, it became the story everyone was repeating. People who usually kept to themselves now stopped him on the sidewalk to ask if it was true. Some of them tried to hide their laughter. Others didn't even bother. They clapped him on the back and said things like, "Finally, someone stood up to her," or "I wish I had the guts to do what you did." For the first time since moving into that neighborhood, he felt a sense of quiet pride. It wasn't just about his garage anymore. It was about showing everyone that Karen wasn't untouchable. For years, she had acted like she controlled everything, but now people saw that she could be challenged. That realization gave his neighbors courage, too. They no longer spoke of her with the same fear in their voices. Instead, there was amusement. And even a little relief. Karen, on the other hand, reacted exactly as he had imagined. She tried to act as though nothing had happened. When people asked her about the boxes, she brushed it off, saying they had been moved to another place or that she had taken care of it, but her anger simmered just beneath the surface. She could no longer walk around with the same authority as before. Everyone knew she had been outsmarted, and that knowledge weakened the power she had built through fear and arrogance. He noticed small changes in the way people treated her. The neighbor who always rushed to trim his lawn after Karen's lectures no longer seemed to care if the grass grew a little long. Families who used to hurry to bring their trash bins in the second she scolded them now left them out longer without guilt. Even the neighborhood kids who once scattered when she shouted at them for riding their bikes on the sidewalk no longer moved so quickly. The spell she had cast over the community was broken, and it all started with those boxes disappearing. For him personally, the change was even more satisfying. Every time he parked his car inside the now empty garage, he felt a deep sense of victory. The clean, open space reminded him of his patience, his cleverness, and the way he had taken control of the situation. The garage was no longer just a storage place for tools and cars. It had become a symbol of standing up for himself. There were moments when Karen still tried to test him. Once she passed by while he was watering his plants and made a sharp comment about the length of his hedges. He looked her straight in the eye and said calmly, "If you don't like them, you don't have to look." The look on her face was priceless. She had expected him to defend himself nervously or scramble to apologize like others usually did. Instead, she realized that he was no longer afraid of her. She walked away quickly, muttering under her breath. But she never mentioned his hedges again. The victory also taught him something important about dealing with difficult people. He realized that some people only have power because others give it to them. Karen's control over the neighborhood wasn't built on real authority. It was built on fear. The moment he refused to play by her rules, the moment he stopped letting her words and actions affect him, she lost her grip. That understanding gave him a new kind of confidence, not just in dealing with Karen, but in life in general. Over the next few weeks, he noticed Karen becoming quieter at HOA meetings. She no longer barked orders the way she used to. Instead, she offered suggestions in a softer voice, clearly aware that her reputation had taken a hit. Whenever the subject of community storage or property rules came up, people smirked, and she quickly changed the topic. The irony was delicious. After all her years of bossing people around, the one time she broke the rules herself cost her more than she could have imagined. Though she never admitted it, he knew she regretted what happened. He could see it in her face every time their eyes met. She still hated him, of course, but she also feared him in a way. Not fear of violence or threats, but fear of being exposed again, of being embarrassed in front of the community. She had learned that he wasn't someone she could push around, and that lesson kept her in check. One afternoon, as he sat in his driveway washing his car, one of his older neighbors came over with a lawn chair. He sat down, chuckled, and said, "You know, son, I've lived here for 20 years, and I've never seen Karen so quiet. What you did was brave. We all thank you for it." Hearing that filled him with warmth. He hadn't planned his actions for praise, but knowing that others felt freer because of it made everything worthwhile. He realized that standing up for himself hadn't just helped him, it helped the entire neighborhood at night. When he looked out of his window, the houses seemed calmer somehow. People smiled more when they passed each other. Kids laughed louder. The tension that Karen used to bring had started to fade. And though she still lived there, her shadow no longer loomed as large. For him, the whole experience became a story he would never forget. Whenever he thought back to the day he found those boxes in his garage, he no longer felt frustration or anger. Instead, he felt a kind of amusement. What had once been an invasion of his space had turned into the moment he reclaimed his voice. The garage stayed empty, clean, and organized from then on. He used it the way he wanted, fixing his shelves, parking his car, letting his kids ride their bikes inside when it rained. Each time, he remembered how close he had come to losing control of his own home and how important it was to take a stand. When someone crossed the line, Karen never got her boxers back, and she never got her power back either. The neighborhood was proof of that. And though she still strutted around with her usual pride, deep down, she knew that the moment she had forced her things into someone else's space was the moment she had lost. He didn't need to say anything more to her. The silence of the empty garage was loud enough. It was a reminder to her and to everyone that respect wasn't something you could demand through arrogance. It was something you had to give if you wanted it in return, and so life moved on. The drama faded, replaced by ordinary days filled with laughter, small chores, and peaceful evenings. But the memory of those vanished boxes stayed alive in the community, told and retold like a small legend. For years, whenever someone mentioned Karen's name, people would smile knowingly and say, "Remember the garage incident?"
Maybe.
And laughter would follow. For him, that was the sweetest ending of all.